All right, welcome along to another episode of the DePIN Coffee Hour. Today we're talking about drones. So imagine a future where you're in an autonomous drone taxi on the way to a meeting. Around you, millions of Amazon delivery drones are zipping through the sky, missing your little flying death capsule by millimeters on every side, turning what should be a dull commute into something that feels less like being in traffic and more like being strapped to a shopping trolley and fired through a wasp's nest. And then the AI tells you to relax because it's running on ultra-precise, real-time spatial infrastructure. And then AOS goes down and a giant Amazon delivery drone turns you into road paste. So the real question is, what infrastructure actually keeps the autonomous sky alive, and why might DePIN be the only sane way to build it? With me today to talk about that, I am very happy to welcome Grant from FlightGrid. How are you doing, Grant?
Hey, good morning. Good to see you.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way.
Yeah.
St. Patrick's Day where I am. So, I guess just why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory and what you're building at FlightGrid?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really the backstory for us is at SkySafe, we've been in the business of thinking about how do you manage drones in the airspace? What's going on there? How do you track drones? How do you stop bad drones that are potentially doing bad things? And we've been in this space for just over 10 years now. So a problem that started out primarily on the military side has now really grown into a thing that affects all sorts of industries. You know, whether it's, as you alluded to, in the future, you've got urban air mobility stuff, you've got deliveries, but even today, you've got a lot of really great work by drones of doing inspection, doing infrastructure work, all kinds of things that enable, you know, the societies that we have.
Right. Okay. Do you imagine it'll change a lot from, like you said, you've been doing it for 10 years, right? So I would imagine 10 years ago, well, I know 10 years ago that the drone landscape and autonomous flying vehicles landscape looked very different than it does today. So how is what you're doing changed, and how do you see the future, I suppose, of the space?
Yeah, well, a lot has really changed and evolved over the last 10 years. You know, when we first started, most of the people that were thinking about drones, they were kind of thinking about, little hobbyist things. It was very split. It was either little hobbyist things that kind of nobody really cared about, that might be just sort of RC hobbyists or whatever, or they were thinking about big military drones or small drones on the battlefield. There really wasn't the middle ground of actual good commercial drone use and all of these new applications. That's really the big thing that's kind of changed and evolved over the last 10 years. And I think that, you know, where things are going is a lot of what's taken that time over the last 10 years has been not just the technology, not just building better drones and better control systems, but also building out the infrastructure and the rules and the regulations to actually enable it. You know, I think that's one of the things that sets apart when you start talking about stuff like drones that are actually, stuff in the real world, right? It's not just some software. It's not just some websites. It's physical things that share the airspace that we all share together. And to do that, you have to have a lot of rules of the road, regulations, and kind of the structure to allow everybody to operate safely.
Right. So how do you do that when you've got obviously a lot of different vested interests, right? I mean, there's, like you say, there's your RC hobbyist types, flying their drones for fun, racing drones, that kind of thing. Yeah. I would imagine a very low level, like from an altitude perspective. And then presumably you have multiple layers layers in the sky of different types of aircraft that could possibly take up that space. Obviously, there's a lot of space up there relative to on the ground. So it's an inevitability to me that we're going to have drone taxis to take us from A to B that are completely autonomous. I mean, I was obviously being a little bit tongue-in-cheek in my intro, but it does seem like, like that's the future. Is we're going to be, you call a taxi and it's going to land basically, and then bring you where you want to go. Yeah. And Amazon, DoorDash, all those things are going to be presumably delivered by a drone, because it's just an economy of scale there. There's a unit economics that makes a lot of sense, I think. So how do you get all those very different?
How does it work? Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I'd say the drone industry has gone through a number of phases over the last 10 years. And in the beginning, it was really about, okay, how do you develop this technology to be effective? How do you make drones that are helpful and useful and have the capabilities that we need to actually be useful in the real world? That was kind of what I would think about as phase one. In phase two, okay, you've got all these drones, but then how do you use them effectively? How do you actually allow people to use them safely? And one of the things that we have, not just in the US, but worldwide, is a really well-developed air traffic control network for manned aviation. We have lots of really good safety protocols and regulations. That's all so well developed in the manned aviation airspace that what was necessary and what took quite a few years was getting analogous sets of rules and regulations around the unmanned airspace, especially the small drones, to figure out, okay, how do we do this safely together? Because what you can't do is you can't just say, okay, great, everybody, fly your drone, be safe. As your little example the example in the beginning, pointed out, if you're going to get to that, the scene in The Fifth Element, and there's just flying cars and drones and stuff everywhere, you got to have some real tight coordination. And so what the FAA and industry have been involved with for quite a while now is building out the rules, building out those rules of the road, the regulations. And now we've really gotten to the point where the regulations and that structure of rules it's matured to the point where now it's like, okay, now how do we build out the infrastructure of data sharing and sensing to be able to then apply those rules and make sure that people are following them and that there's enforcement mechanisms. And that's really what SkySafe is all about. And that's really what Flight Grid is all about, that we're building with this nationwide network of drones tracking sensors that people deploy to build out that awareness, that airspace intelligence infrastructure, so that folks can know where are the drones, what are they doing, and coordinate that activity. Okay,
so I'm going to ask you some really dumb questions now, but it's just because I think for somebody who's outside of that industry, in other words, a lot of the people that will listen or watch the show, and myself, what is the unmanned airspace? Like, is it a particular altitude? Are there pockets of it, like around I would imagine around airports and stuff like that, that there's no fly zones and things like that. So when we talk about unmanned air zone, are we talking about like 100 feet off the roof of everybody's house, or what are we actually talking about?
So we're talking about a few things. Actually, here, wait, one second. I got to fix something.
All right. So while Grant is fixing something, I think one of the reasons that I find this particularly fascinating is because...
There we go.
You're back.
I
think one of the reasons that I think this is super fascinating is because I don't actually think that we're that far away from having... I mean, you described it as a fifth element sky, that's fair enough, but I don't think we're actually that far away in terms of like years from that. I mean, I know obviously we have a bit of groundwork to lay, and I mean the whole safety side of things and the infrastructure side of things of how do we do it safely. We can get into that because I'd love to understand the nature of how drones and anything in the air will understand where everything else is, sort of like the 3D spatial awareness. I've had a number of people on in the last few weeks talking about robots on the ground, so like taxis and humanoid robots walking around, and how they'll be spatially aware and how they can all essentially communicate with each other. So I would imagine that that's relatively straightforward in one sense versus what will happen in the air, because in the air obviously you've got an extra dimension, which is good and bad, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and also in the air, in some ways the stakes are higher, right? When you talk about things that are in the air, I mean, that's why we have such tight aviation regulations. That's why, groups like the FAA in the US or JCAB in Japan or Eurocontrol, they have so much, they have such a hard mission. Safety is so difficult for that. So it involves a lot of coordination, it involves a lot of stuff, and it's one of the problems you have to think about is how do you actually do enforcement, and how do you make sure that if people break the rules, that there's actually consequences, that there's actually reasons and motivations for people to follow the rules, and that's kind of what it's all about. So that's why so I don't know if you're aware. I imagine you're not like a drone pilot. It doesn't sound like. But I
have a drone.
Folks,
I've flown it a bit for some travel shots and stuff, but I'm not like a. Now I will say I have watched quite a few of those RC YouTube videos where you see the guys like flying, racing the drones around. That looks really cool.
Yeah.
But I don't have time. I just don't. I always have so much on. It's impossible to get the time to do stuff like that. So it is fascinating to me though, and I think I heard of a project that was looking to try and figure out the air rights above people's houses. So if drones are going to be flying through, is there a way to create a system where essentially if you have to live with drones flying over your home, that you get some way rewarded for that?
Right.
Not an issue if there's one or two like per day, but if it's zip, Amazon deliveries and Domino's deliveries or whatever, then that's a different thing entirely. So but just to go back to the safety thing, like when we talk about manned airplanes, again, this is my understanding currently, is that you've essentially got control towers, like which would sort of be, I guess it is sort of decentralized in a sense, but it's major centers, major points near airports usually where planes flying over that they kind of aren't really in contact with anybody for most of their journey. Like for example, if a plane flies from New York to Dublin, a lot of that's going to be over the Atlantic Ocean, and it's going to be on a flight path. So when it leaves the biggest zone in the States, they know where it was and where it's going, but pretty much they have no idea where it actually is.
So I think the bigger thing we're talking here is mostly about national airspace. When you start talking about transatlantic flights, there's differences there as far as handover, but within a nation's airspace, there's meant to be continuity. There's meant to be communication across the way. Everybody should know where it is. So, like in the manned aviation world, we have what's called ADS-B, right? That's the broadcast standard that all of the aircraft put out, that puts out its location, its identifier, serial number, essentially tail number. And all of that information, so that everybody knows where that plane is, so that everybody can react accordingly. Now, the problem at the beginning of the drone space was that there was no equivalent. So if somebody was flying a drone in an area, you just wouldn't know that necessarily unless you physically saw the drone with your own eyes. Now, that's changed in both the US and EU, Japan, a number of other places. That's changed because there's been, all these rules put out. In the US, it's called remote ID. So drones are, as of literally 2 years ago, March 2024, drones in the US are required to broadcast this protocol called remote ID. It's required to have the drone's location, the serial number, and the pilot's location, where the operator is actually standing. And the reason there is for that accountability and for that awareness. So all the drones have to be transmitting this thing. But back when the FAA and industry worked together, there was what's called an aviation rulemaking committee, an ARC, that the FAA ran around defining the remote ID standard. And everybody put a lot of effort into defining that standard and making the rules so that everyone would be able to follow them. But what didn't happen yet at that time was the second half of it, of you get all the drones to transmit, that's really great, but now who's listening to that signal? And what are they, how are we sharing the data? What's actually happening with that? ADS-B in the manned aviation world wouldn't matter at all if there was no one hearing these ADS-B signals. But that's why when you go on, different websites that are running receiver networks for ADS-B, so things like FlightAware or Flight Radar 24, or even in the DePIN space, WingBits, you have all of these networks that are actually bringing together all that data to share it, to actually utilize it. That's kind of the key thing. And that's what we're doing with FlightGrid. You've got all these drones that are transmitting, but nobody's figured out how to build out this large scale network that you need to get that data, share that data, and create a safe airspace in that way. So that's exactly what we're doing. And I think the DePIN model is uniquely positioned to actually build the sort of scale you need for a nationwide network like that.
Yeah, I agree. It's perfect for it because what you want presumably are a lot of receivers. I was going to ask about that protocol for drones. What's the kind of range, I suppose, that a drone would broadcast that? Because something has to pick it up, right? So you've either got to have a lot of receivers, or like on people's roofs, I guess, or other drones that can like piggyback the signal so that there's a network, essentially like a mesh network.
The answer is you need a lot of receivers. That is the correct answer. The protocol really was meant to be easy to comply with, easy to have drones that transmit that information correctly. So there's multiple different protocols that they can use to comply. That makes it a little bit harder as the receiver to actually, you have to be receiving all of the different types of protocols. There's 4 different protocols in it, basically, 4 different means of transmission. And as the receiver, you need to be looking at all of those. You need to be receiving all possible data and kind of optimizing as best you can. So some drones are trackable at farther distances. Some drones are less good, but it kind of runs the gamut. That's why what you need is a network of sensors. You need redundancy and, good density of coverage over an urban area. That's why it's genuinely a hard problem. And that's why we've been working on this problem for 10 years in this space. We're the world leaders in this for a reason. Right.
So tell us a little bit about what it is exactly that you're building. You guys are building the receivers, the DePIN network, so that all works?
Yeah.
Or why don't you just...
Yeah. So basically, the way to think about it is SkySafe. We've been in the drone tracking business for quite a few years now. We've already built out all of the technology. We've built out the large-scale back-end infrastructure, the network that takes in drone tracking data and distributes it to all of our different types of customers. So our customers run the gamut from, government customers, military, law enforcement, but also on the commercial side, you've got things like airports, stadiums, critical infrastructure providers like power companies and oil and gas, all of these different groups that need that airspace awareness. So we provide that as a service, as a subscription to all of these different customers. They see the drone activity around their facilities, around their operations. And SkySafe, as an entity, we've been building and designing the sensor technology and the network now for a number of years. And what we've been doing is deploying all of our large-scale sensors our own, in a centralized way. So we've got coverage in about 27 cities in the US right now, where we've built out some amount of coverage. We operate kind of like a cell network provider, where we're literally, we deploy our towers in cities, we have that coverage area, and then we can provide that data to all the different groups that need it. Now, what we're doing with FlightGrid, which we announced just recently, and we've started pre-orders of the sensor there, what we've basically done is designed a smaller, low-cost sensor that anyone can buy, and they can put up on their location, on their roof, and essentially be continuously contributing data to that network, to this airspace tracking network, this airspace awareness network, and then be rewarded for that. I think the only way that you get a truly fully nationwide network that responds to the needs of all the parties involved here, to keep us safe, the way you do that is you have a really broad network with lots of sensors, lots of really quality coverage, and lots of people participating. So that's what FlightGrid is all about. It's about building this community-driven network to track drone activity to make our airspace safer.
All right, cool. So say I'm in on that. Say I think that sounds awesome. I want to be part of that network.
Yeah.
What's in it for me, I suppose, is the question that I kind of wanted to get to. Like with most DePIN models, there's some sort of a tokenomic flywheel or some sort of reward-based sharing.
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So what's in it for you is 2 things. One, the first thing is you're going to see the drone activity, right? You as the sensor operator, you're going to get to actually see the drone activity that's happening around your facility or multiple facilities with multiple sensors. You get your view of that. So if you're someone who has an interest in that, a drone enthusiast, aviation enthusiast, that's the first thing you get, is you actually get to see this data from your sensor. The second thing goes back to the actual rewards. Now, I think the DePIN model, it's really good at creating that link between if there's actual demand for the data, for the product, for the service that DePIN network is providing, and there's actual revenue from that, The DePIN model provides a method where you can actually have all of the participants share in that revenue. So that's what I love about it. The problem with most DePIN projects these days, and really what separates the good ones from the bad is there has to be that demand side, and there has to actually be that revenue. And I think one of the valuable things for us at SkySafe is that we already have that, right? We've existed for a while as a traditional company. We already have millions of dollars in annual revenue on providing this coverage, providing this data. And so for us, as soon as we can get this flight grid network bootstrapped, as soon as we can get all the participants out there with their sensors in these critical areas, it's very easy for us to then connect that together, turn on that faucet, share in the actual value. We're starting out with reward point distribution as the network gets bootstrapped. But the great thing is, we actually have the revenue to back this and to actually flow that back to the community, do token buys, do whatever. And that's to me what really makes a healthy DePIN network. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to have people like you, like everybody else, deploy sensors and actually keep them running, keep them maintained, keep interest in it, it's on us to make sure that they're getting the value for providing that service to the network. So number one is being able to see the drone activity around them and sharing that data. And number two is being able to reap rewards from the fact that that data is actually valuable and actually being paid for by real customers who need it.
Okay, cool. And who would be an example of a real customer who needs it?
Yeah. So customers who need this sort of airspace awareness data include, airports, stadiums, critical infrastructure providers. So like power plants, power companies, oil and gas providers, military bases, local law enforcement. You think about all of the different sorts of situations where drones have interfered with operations or have, been a threat to public safety, any of that kind of stuff. The other thing too is that in the longer term, when we think about how do you coordinate the airspace, what are you actually doing with drones? As soon as you start as like a commercial provider, as soon as you start utilizing drones in your operations, like if you're a power company and you're using drones in your daily operations to do inspections of your infrastructure, of transmissions lines, power plant, whatever, as soon as you start using drones in your operations, you realize it's now vitally important to be able to know what other drones are in the air and actually have that coordination. So that's what SkySafe provides. That's what the Flight Grid network is looking to provide with this DePIN model. And that data has real value.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine if it's online, in a sort of like a Web3 sense, for autonomous drones, I'd imagine it'd be very, very useful because they wouldn't need necessarily, like just from a network topology perspective, it would be a lot more efficient for them to get the data and as they need it. Like you say, I mean, if a company is flying 100 drone missions or whatever to inspect their infrastructure this week, it might not be the same next week. And, so it just creates all sort of economic issues, I would say, that technology solves for, especially in a DePIN sense. That's really cool. So
and when we think about the drone airspace, right? Part of what I would also encourage people to go look up is, there's the question of what is the eventual vision for how do you manage drones in the airspace? How do you integrate them safely into national airspace alongside manned aviation? And there is an answer for that. The answer for that, so it's what's called UTM, which is UAS traffic management. Basically, it's air traffic control for drones. And what that UTM network looks like, you can go and read, the FAA and NASA have put out a series of papers over the years about kind of building out, this is what the infrastructure, this is what the structure of this UTM network will look like. And basically, it's a federated network of data providers on the one side who are flowing in the data that's necessary to coordinate all this air traffic, and then drone service providers on the other side, the people actually flying the drones, who they're the ones who are consuming that data, publishing their flight plans, coordinating that airspace. And that's what this network becomes, right? That's what everybody in industry and the FAA are working to build at the moment. And the core foundational data in that UTM network is what Flight Grid provides. It's that airspace awareness. It's knowing where all the drones are in real time and understanding what's being used there. That's the core data that is required to even start to have a UTM network to actually understand what's in the airspace. That's what the future looks like, and that's how we get there.
Right. Okay, cool. So the drones would actually be using that network, which SkySafe would be, or FlightGrid would be part of the data providers. Interesting. What stage are you guys at? Are the sensors for sale right now, or how does one get a sensor?
So you can go right now. Yeah, so you can go right now on flightgrid.io and pre-order a sensor. We're going to be shipping basically beginning of Q3 this year. The big thing right now is in the pre-order stage. In the early production batches, you get bonus reward points if you pre-order now. Like I want people to be able to commit to this network and reap the rewards from it. So that's the stage we're at right now, is pre-orders and building that up. So order your sensor now.
What does the sensor cost?
$949.
$949. Okay.
Yep.
And is that
US dollars? And right now,
US?
So right now in this launch, we're doing US only. So we're building out the US infrastructure first, but then we'll be doing launches in other countries starting in the beginning probably of 2027. So we're targeting like Japan, EU, probably UK, basically other places that have similar regulatory infrastructure, similar level of maturity of the drone industry at this point, and we'll be rolling that out so that eventually what you have is really a worldwide drone tracking network that can help, again, to your point earlier, in the same way that we have that for manned aviation. Right.
So, and are these sensors something that I could install myself, or is it like a big tower thing that sits on top of my?
No, definitely. It's basically the same as installing like a Wi-Fi access point. It's a PoE powered device. You mount it on your roof. It has antennas. You run Ethernet to it with that power, and it connects back into the FlightGrid network to share that data and reap those rewards.
So it's easy as Starlink. Probably easier, actually, based on my Starlink experience, anyway. So, all right, that sounds pretty good. So, when do you expect?
I think it sounds great. Everyone should participate.
When do you expect people will actually get to the point? Like, do you need a certain amount of network saturation or geography saturation before you get to a point where rewards kick in and people start to earn? Because obviously, if you're talking about spending $1,000, give or take, to get up and running, you're going to want, like, someone doing that is going to want to be somebody, or at least it's been my experience in this space, that they want to believe in what they're doing. They want to think it's got really solid long-term legs, and they're going to be looking at, like, what's my ROI window. So when do you expect, like, people to be in an ROI positive state from putting in the 1,000 at the start, or the 949 or whatever?
Yeah, well, I think the key thing here is, because we already have contracts, because we already have broad customer base and the ability to monetize that data, it puts us in a unique position to actually be flowing that back soon, right? And be actually providing value. To me, as soon as the network has any density of which we can actually monetize the data,
right.
That's the whole game, right? We're in a unique position to be able to monetize data very quickly, with customers in different cities. We already have customers in all sorts of cities. So bolstering our current coverage areas with additional FlightGrid sensors means it's already monetizable day one. And then building out new areas that we don't currently have coverage with new FlightGrid sensors, you don't need that great of density to start to be providing actual value to those customer groups.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, because I really think one of the biggest challenges for most DePINs, especially when you talk about DePINs and, as the average, this is why I got into DePIN, was because I thought, wow, this is really awesome. If we can, first of all, I just really believe in the idea of decentralization. I think it's really, really important for humanity going forward. But like, specifically DePIN, it felt like it was like a playing field leveler, in a sense that anybody could potentially participate. You didn't have to be, a PhD in anything. You just had to have something, old hardware, a roof in this case.
I think that's really the beauty of the DePIN model, is it's not just decentralizing, the location or use of the thing. It's decentralizing what pieces of expertise, what unique things different participants need to bring to the table. So SkySafe as a company, we're bringing together a decade of experience in the drone tracking world and in the drone industry, and we're bringing all of the technology we've built. And then what we're doing in the decentralization of that is, okay, everybody providing that physical location in the real world and the physical operation and maintenance of the sensor, but they don't need to be drone experts. They don't need to be wireless signals experts to figure that out. And that's really the value of a decentralized system, is you can utilize the capabilities and the resources of each party involved across the entire community. And I love that.
Right. Yeah, me too. And it sounds like, I mean, the hardest thing, I can say this from 20 years of business experience, the hardest thing is building up that momentum, that network effect, where you're like what you guys already have. In DePIN, we label it demand. And there's just a ton of DePIN networks that started with a great idea and built really cool tech and just didn't or haven't yet put enough emphasis, enough effort into the demand gen side of things, which is unfortunate because that's where the math starts to make sense, right? It's like, well, we have this amount of nodes, we have this amount of income to share with the nodes, therefore each node is going to earn X. And that
and if that income is $5, it's not going to work for anybody.
Yeah. $1 million.
Well, and I think that's,
we're making $1,000 a year. It's like,
the greatest failures in the DePIN world have really just been projects where it's a great idea for building some amazing network, some great technological accomplishment, but it very quickly turns into a solution looking for a problem. And if they haven't really validated that problem and that demand side piece, then it doesn't matter how beautiful and perfect your technological network is. If nobody cares to pay for it, it doesn't matter. So I think that's where I got really excited about this from my side, as I learned more and connected more in the DePIN community and, explored this idea with SkySafe was, we've already got the entire demand side. It's just a matter of hyperscaling that supply side to be able to really fulfill all the demand that's out there for this data. Right.
Yeah, that is very exciting. Do you guys have a token, or are you doing your own token, or what way is that going to work?
We're going to be. We're starting with rewards points, but then there will be a token launch after that all rolls into.
Cool. Do you have any idea? Do you have any details on that yet, or is it?
I'm trying really hard to not give explicit guidance on that. Okay, the real thing too is like, well, and the real thing too is, I want to be able to move that up as soon as possible, not just, kind of push it off forever. Because again, once you've actually got the economic foundations to make it work, you want to make it work as quickly as you can. But I don't want to make any promises, preemptively. Right. The first thing we've got to do is we've got to get pre-orders, we've got to get sensors out there, and we've got to build this network. And the more rapidly we can do that, the more rapidly we can, reap the benefits of that, for providing that data, monetizing that, and getting the rewards out there. The other thing too is, what I want as far as a community and as far as people who are participating in FlightGrid is I want people who are in it for the long haul, who really understand the long-term vision and the value that it's going to be providing. If somebody's just looking for some sort of, quick pop airdrop token launch thing and, then cash out, then, number one, you shouldn't really be touching DePIN at all. But number two, you're not going to be building a beneficial network with FlightGrid. What we're trying to do is build a really long-term network that has long-term stable usefulness and stable earning potential for everyone involved. And I know we can build that, but we got to get there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating idea. I think, I agree with you. I think, but again, that's one of the things that qualifies people out, I suppose, is the fact that you have to put in cash up front. Like if you were giving away sensors for free, you'd get a lot of that, which is what happens with airdrops, right? People give away a lot of tokens for free.
Yep.
They absolutely, they inflate the ever-loving shit out of their token, pardon my language, and and then they're wondering why they're the token chart looks like depression.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I care about is long-term value, long-term real useful infrastructure to society, and long-term rewards and building that value over time for everyone involved. That's what matters.
And this is a space that's only growing. It's only going to grow.
Exactly.
Anybody who's sat in traffic will understands that on the ground, like at the two-dimensional transportation view that we have today, that is just not going to be the future. It can't be. I mean, we've already got the technology, actually. And
the technology is so capable now. I mean, the things that drones can do are incredible. Really, the only thing that's holding us back now is the infrastructure and being able to build out all of these sorts of networks and coordinate all of it safely. Right. Because I'll say the one big risk to the entire sort of drone industry is that we don't get these things right. We do kind of a shoddy job of ensuring the safety of the public, and we have any number of bad drone incidents. And as soon as you actually have bad drone incidents and the public sours their view of drones, then they say, well, let's just not have drones at all. And that's not what we want. What we want is the really great
over my
capabilities.
House.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to be good stewards of the airspace. We've got to be good, societal members and do the right thing for everybody and build that long-term value, not just to drone operators and infrastructure providers, but to everyone. Everyone gets to reap the rewards in the same way that with manned aviation, everybody reaps the rewards of incredible access to commercial air travel.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose one of the things I worry about is that humanity's not really great at getting really far ahead of the ball like that, and saying, well, like before we launch all this cool tech, let's make sure that it's going to be safe. We don't. I don't know why. I don't know why we don't. We just seem to rush towards the innovation, rush towards the thing without really putting enough. And then it takes an instant, like a drone with like 4 people in it crashing into someone's house and killing like 10 people or something. Before everybody's like, oh, we really.
Well, thankfully, that's why we have such intense regulation in the aerial space. In the aerospace world, we have a lot of rules and regulations for a reason. Because we want to make sure that, I think the drone space and the aviation space as a whole is one of the few places where the technology can't outrun the safety regulations. It literally can't. And that's why the drone industry has been so slow to build up and so methodically building up over the last 5, now 10 years, because it can't move faster than the regulations. The regulations have to slowly and methodically evolve. And that's what's been happening. But we're at the point where we can now start to actually do these real great things that are the potential of drone use.
Right. Do you think, assuming it sounds like at least that we have the infrastructure in place, or we will have very shortly the infrastructure in place to make it safe. So what is the thing, in your opinion, that's stopping us taking that leap to, for example, drone taxis? Because I've seen videos. Now they weren't very good. I mean, it really reminded me of the kind of videos that you see of like when man started to learn, like the Wright brothers and stuff like that. Those planes where it's kind of like we're really experimenting here. But so I've seen a few of those with the drone vehicles, let's call them, with one person, which is it just looks like you're like the kind of drone that you'd have yourself for flying around taking video footage, but much bigger with like the 4 propeller.
We've still got a way to go as far as urban air mobility and building out those sorts of autonomous taxi services. But the first step is having the infrastructure out there to actually manage the airspace safely. And what's the first step of that is go to flightgrid.io, pre-order a sensor, be a part of the solution, and actually build the network to do it. That would be my pitch to everybody.
Right. So there you go, guys. Go get yourself a sensor or pre-order a sensor and max your rewards. And
if you're in other countries outside the US that we may be launching next year, go on our website, join our mailing list, and get notified when we launch in those countries. Because I'd also love to get a better indication of folks that are interested in other countries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even just the wait list will tell you where it's popping off. I mean, I think on this show, we have a really good split between like US viewers, European viewers, and Hong Kong, funnily enough. Some parts of Southeast Asia as well. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a kind of a techie crypto centers or whatever. But if you're watching and you're interested, go along and register for
and feel free to reach out. I'm easy to contact. My email is grant@flightgrid.io. you can check out our website, get on our mailing list, check out our X at FlightGrid, and stay tuned with what we're building.
Yeah, if all those tags are in the post that you would be watching this on. If not, you can go to DePIN Coffee Hour and it'll all be there. And we'll be putting out some videos over the course of the week, shorts and things like that as well. So if anybody's interested, if you see this through one of those, by all means, check out Grant. Any final words that you want to share with people? Anything you want people to think about other than going and signing up?
Mostly go and sign up. Be a part of the solution, be a part of the network that's really going to allow us to unlock all of the capabilities of drone technology. I think that's the big message to me. And I think it really takes all of us working as a community, as a society, to unlock all of the potential of drones together.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it from a pure forecasting perspective, if you think about trend and growth, you don't have to be a genius to think about the fact that the only way the entire drone industry, the drone space is going is up, in the sense of there will be more drones, there will be more airspace with drones flying through it, there'll be more types of drones. Usage at every level of industry and society is my guess, because that's the way we go with humanity, and it's quicker, it's easier, it's more cost effective in a lot of ways to get from A to B, and it's probably a lot more convenient, which is usually a winning formula. And then when you pair that with the need for these things and the fact that you're going to make an investment once and it's going to sit on your roof presumably forever until until maybe there's a better model out 10 years later or something like that. So it is a long-term investment, but it just seems like a no-brainer to me. So yeah, I'll be following the project with a lot of interest, and when you launch in Europe, I'm sure I'll be on the list. Thanks a million for joining us, Grant. To everybody else, also thanks a million for joining us. If you haven't already followed myself, Grant, and DePIN Coffee Hour, go ahead and do that. All the links and everything are below this video, wherever you're watching. If you're on YouTube, give us a subscribe. We really appreciate it. We have a brand new X account now that we've gone our separate ways from Havelo. So we are in need of growing that a little bit in terms of the people that are subscribed. So hit us with a follow. We would really appreciate it, and I'll keep making the show. Until next week, thank you very much, everybody who tuned in to listen, and we'll see you next week. Be kind to each other out there.